right? Your story of failure in Broken turned into a story of success. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and we all want that story, right? And I think when we get to the bottom of the V and start our way up, it's filled with success. I found a pathway to recovery that worked for me. 12-step recovery. I loved it. I took to it. It took me a little while to learn how those steps apply to much more than just my drinking and my drugging, but applied to the rest of my life. From that came the opportunity to not just recover, but to look around and see that there were other things that I could do. And I landed a job at Hazelden in 1996. My personal life, of course, it improved. I've got a family. I've got 3 children who knew where their mom and dad came from, understood where dad worked. They were in Broken, their pictures. So mine was a good news story, as they typically are when we bounce off that bottom and head on our way back up. And I was glad to celebrate that and glad to share that in Broken.
I'll just talk about a couple of the highlights that get narrated at the end of the book Broken. And one of those was you got this feature in People magazine. You were on Good Morning America, a book tour for this book that went on to become a New York Times bestseller. You got to be part of this amazing recovery advocacy movement. You got to find a place at the Hazelden, now the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation, as a career. Talk about a victory, right? It was this perfect example of this V-shaped trajectory that the first half of Broken was this narrative of just awfulness, followed by this rock bottom moment where you were brought to your senses, came to your senses, found this sort of way forward, and that turned into this journey of really remarkable success.
Yeah.
So you were an example of that V-shaped victory.
I was, and I was happy to share that story in my recovery meetings. I was happy to share that story in Rotary meetings when I started speaking out. I was happy to share that story in this book. Yeah, it was a good news story, and it was a true story. There's some details about my life that are not in Broken because I had to be respectful of other people, particularly during the phase when I was under the influence and the harm that I caused. But it was a true story, and it was a good news story.
Yeah. Well, the question, of course, and the question that you go on to try and answer in your next book